I never thought I'd be thanking my uncle for firing me from my family's company, but sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the sweetest victories. Before I tell you how I turned from a terminated employee to the majority owner of Sullivan Industries, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family or pushed out of something you helped build, this story is for you. Hit that like button because the revenge in this story is better than any golden parachute. My name is James Sullivan, and at 32, I learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to gain even more. But let me take you back to where it all began, in the gleaming headquarters of Sullivan Industries in downtown Chicago, where my family's name stood proudly on the 60th floor of a building I thought I'd run someday. Sullivan Industries wasn't just a company, it was our legacy. My grandfather, Patrick Sullivan, started it in 1962 with nothing but a small electronics repair shop and a vision for something bigger. Through innovation and relentless work, he built it into one of the Midwest's largest technology manufacturing companies. Growing up, every family dinner was a business meeting, every holiday a chance to discuss quarterly projections. I was the eldest grandchild, and from the moment I could walk, I was being groomed to eventually lead the company. While other kids spent summers at camp, I was interning in different departments, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. My grandfather's words became my mantra. Know the business from the foundation to the penthouse, James. Real leaders understand every floor. By 16, I could read financial statements better than my textbooks. At 18, I was working on the factory floor during school breaks, learning about our manufacturing processes firsthand. My father, Michael Sullivan, ran operations while my uncle, Robert Sullivan, handled the financial side. They were supposed to be equal partners, but Uncle Robert had always been better at corporate politics than my more straightforward father. Business is about more than just products and profits, James, my grandfather would tell me during our private mentoring sessions in his home office. It's about understanding people, their motivations, their weaknesses, and most importantly, their ambitions. I took his words to heart, earning my undergraduate degree in engineering and an MBA from Northwestern. While my cousins treated the family business as their personal trust fund, I was putting in 18-hour days, learning every aspect of our operations. The problems began after my grandfather's unexpected death 5 years ago. He'd always been the balancing force between my father and Uncle Robert. Without him, the power dynamics shifted rapidly. Uncle Robert had 2 children, my cousins Derek and Victoria, both of whom held executive titles but rarely showed up for actual work. Derek, as vice president of business development, spent more time on his yacht than in his office. Victoria's role as director of corporate communications mainly involved posting on social media about being a girl boss. The real work fell to me and my father. We'd recently secured a major defense contract that could double our company's value, largely due to the manufacturing innovations I'd implemented. The future looked promising until it didn't. The day everything changed started normally enough. I was in my office reviewing production schedules for the new contract when my assistant, Sarah, rushed in looking worried. "There's an emergency board meeting," she said, her face concerned. "Your uncle called it, but your father doesn't know what it's about." I headed to the boardroom, passing the wall of Sullivan family photos that chronicled our company's growth. My grandfather's portrait seemed to watch me with concern as I walked by. The boardroom was already full when I arrived. Uncle Robert sat at the head of the table, my grandfather's old spot, with Derek and Victoria flanking him like corporate royalty. My father sat opposite, looking confused and increasingly angry. "Ah, James, good of you to join us," Uncle Robert said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We were just discussing some necessary changes in company leadership." What followed was a masterclass in corporate manipulation. Uncle Robert had spent months quietly consolidating support among the board members, many of whom owed him various favors. He presented a series of concerns about my management style, claiming I was too aggressive in my growth strategies and disrespectful of traditional company values. "The defense contract you negotiated," he said, shuffling through papers, "while impressive in scope, exposes us to unnecessary risk. The board feels we need more experienced leadership." My father stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. "This is ridiculous. That contract could transform our company. James has done more for Sullivan Industries in 5 years than your children have done in their entire careers." "Mind your tone, Michael," Uncle Robert replied coldly. "Remember, You're not the only Sullivan who can make decisions anymore. The vote was quick and brutal. Thanks to Uncle Robert's maneuvering, the board voted to terminate my position and transfer my responsibilities to Derek. My father's protests were drowned out by corporate legalese about restructuring for company stability. "This is about teaching you humility, James," Uncle Robert said as security waited to escort me out. "You've forgotten your place in the family hierarchy. Perhaps some time away will help you remember it." Derek couldn't hide his smirk as he added, "Don't worry, cousin. I'll take good care of your office. That view of Chicago is wasted on someone so limited in vision." I stood slowly, straightening my tie. "Interesting choice of words, Uncle Robert. Humility. Place. Limited vision. I'll remember those." "Are you threatening me?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "Not at all," I replied calmly. "Just taking notes for future reference." As security escorted me to my office to collect my belongings, I passed that wall of family photos again. My grandfather's eyes seemed different now, not concerned but determined. I remembered more of his lessons, ones that hadn't made sense until this moment. "Always have a backup plan, James," he told me once. "And remember, the best moves in business are the ones nobody sees coming." Sarah was waiting in my office, tears in her eyes. "They can't do this," she whispered, helping me pack my personal items. "This company needs you." "It's okay, Sarah," I said, taking one last look at the city skyline from my soon-to-be former office. "Sometimes you have to lose the battle to win the war." My father caught up with me at the elevator. "This isn't over," he promised, his face red with anger. "Robert's gone too far this time." I hugged him briefly. "You're right, Dad. It's not over. But for now, play along. Trust me." As I walked through the lobby of Sullivan Industries for what they thought was the last time, I pulled out my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to Jason Chin, my old roommate from Northwestern who now ran one of the most aggressive investment firms in Asia. The second was to Maria Delgado, a brilliant corporate lawyer who'd been trying to recruit me for years. "Remember that contingency plan we discussed?" I asked Jason. "It's time." To Maria, I simply said, "I'm ready to take you up on that offer. How quickly can you set up a holding company?" Uncle Robert thought he was teaching me humility. Instead, he was about to learn a lesson about underestimating the wrong Sullivan. Walking to my car in the underground parking garage, I smiled, remembering another of my grandfather's favorite sayings. "In business, son, it's not about who has the power today. It's about who's been quietly accumulating it while everyone else was showing off." The game was just beginning, and I had been preparing for this moment longer than anyone suspected. The 6 months following my termination from Sullivan Industries were a masterclass in patience and strategic planning. While my family assumed I was licking my wounds and learning humility, I was orchestrating the most significant business takeover Chicago had seen in decades. The first piece was already in place before they fired me. During my years at Sullivan Industries, I had been quietly purchasing company shares through various holding companies. My grandfather had taught me this strategy, helping me set up my first investment vehicle when I turned 21. "Always keep some cards hidden, James," he'd said, showing me how to structure the purchases to avoid detection. "The best advantage is the one nobody knows you have." Jason Chen's firm, Atlas Capital, became my primary partner in what we called Operation Homecoming. While Uncle Robert was busy installing Derek in my old office, Jason's team was acquiring Sullivan Industries stock through a network of shell companies. "Your uncle's making it almost too easy," Jason commented during one of our secure video calls. "He's so focused on consolidating board control that he's ignoring the actual share market." Maria Delgado proved invaluable in structuring the acquisitions. "Your uncle's weakness," she observed, reviewing the company's shareholder records, "is that he thinks control means having the loudest voice in the room. He's forgotten that true power often whispers." The most challenging part was maintaining appearances. I took a consulting position with a tech startup, making sure word got back to Uncle Robert that I was settling for a lesser role. Derek, predictably, couldn't resist gloating. "Heard you're working for some app company now," he texted one night. "How's that humility lesson going, cousin?" I let him think I was defeated. Meanwhile, I worked 18-hour days, splitting time between my cover job and my real mission. The startup CEO, a friend from business school, was happy to play along, understanding that sometimes the best moves in business require a little misdirection. Victoria's social media posts became an unexpected source of intelligence. Her constant need to showcase her executive lifestyle provided regular updates on company activities. Through her Instagram stories, we learned about board meetings, potential contracts, and most importantly, Uncle Robert's growing overconfidence. 3 months after my firing, Sullivan Industries' stock began to decline. The defense contract I'd secured was floundering under Derek's inexperienced management. Uncle Robert's conservative approach was causing us to lose market share to more innovative competitors. My father, still serving as COO but increasingly sidelined, kept me discreetly informed. "Robert's turning your grandfather's company into his personal kingdom," he reported during our weekly dinners. The board's starting to get nervous. That nervousness was crucial to my plan. Maria had identified several board members who might be receptive to a change in leadership. We began making subtle approaches through mutual connections, testing the waters for support. The real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. My grandfather's old secretary, Margaret, now retired but still sharp as ever, contacted me with interesting information. Before his death, my grandfather had established a series of trust agreements that Uncle Robert had conveniently forgotten to mention during the power transition. "Your grandfather knew Robert's nature," Margaret explained, sharing decades-old documents. "He built in safeguards that nobody's bothered to look for." Those safeguards, once Maria's team decoded the legal language, proved to be game-changing. A significant portion of voting shares were actually controlled by a family trust, whose terms gave preference to third-generation Sullivans actively involved in company operations. "Your grandfather was brilliant," Maria said, reviewing the trust documents. "He set up a system that rewards actual contribution to the company, not just family name." By month 5, our position was stronger than anyone suspected. Through various channels, we controlled nearly 30% of Sullivan Industries shares. The family trust documentation added another 15%. We just needed to consolidate a few more percentage points before making our move. The opportunity came when Uncle Robert, growing increasingly confident in his control, decided to celebrate the company's 60th anniversary with an extravagant gala. The event would coincide with the annual shareholders meeting, where he planned to announce a new direction for Sullivan Industries. "It's going to be epic," Victoria posted on LinkedIn. "Daddy's finally taking the company into the modern era. #girlboss, #familyempire. The irony of that hashtag would soon become apparent. 2 weeks before the shareholders meeting, I met with my father at his house. It was time to bring him fully into the plan. "You've been busy," he said, examining the documentation I shared. His eyes widened as he understood the full scope of what I'd accomplished. "I learned from the best," I replied. "Grandfather didn't just teach me about electronics and manufacturing. He taught me about legacy." Dad's eyes misted as he looked at old photos of him with his father. "Dad always said you were the most like him." Robert never understood that it wasn't just about the name, it was about the work. The final pieces fell into place in the days leading up to the shareholders meeting. Jason's team secured the last crucial block of shares we needed. Maria's legal team prepared the necessary documentation. Even Sarah, my former assistant who had quit shortly after my termination, helped by providing internal updates about Uncle Robert's plans for the meeting. The night before the big day, I stood in my grandfather's old home office, now maintained as a kind of shrine by my grandmother. His presence seemed especially strong as I reviewed our strategy one final time. "Business isn't just about making money," his voice echoed in my memory. "It's about building something that lasts, something worthy of the name you put on it." Tomorrow, at the shareholders meeting, everyone would learn exactly what the Sullivan name meant to me. Uncle Robert would discover that his lesson in humility was about to become a masterclass in underestimating the wrong person. Looking at my grandfather's portrait, I smiled. "Time to restore the foundation you built," I whispered, "and maybe teach a few lessons of my own." The morning of the shareholders meeting dawned clear and cold, typical Chicago weather for early October. I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting my grandfather's old tie pin, a simple gold S that he'd worn to every major company event. Today it would witness another Sullivan milestone. The meeting was being held at the Grand Plaza Hotel, where Uncle Robert had spared no expense in creating his moment of triumph. The ballroom was decorated with 60 years of Sullivan Industries history, photos, prototype displays, and a particularly large portrait of Uncle Robert himself, recently commissioned to mark his visionary leadership. I arrived early, waiting in a side room while the space filled with shareholders, board members, and family. Through the door, I could hear the growing buzz of conversation, the clink of coffee cups, and the rustle of presentation materials being distributed. "Ready?" Jason asked, joining me with a tablet displaying our final share counts. "Everything's in place." Maria arrived moments later, legal documents in hand. "The trust documentation is ironclad," she confirmed. "Your grandfather's provisions are clear and enforceable." At precisely 9 a.m. Uncle Robert called the meeting to order. From my hidden vantage point, I watched him take the podium, the very picture of corporate confidence in his bespoke suit and practiced smile. "Welcome to this historic day for Sullivan Industries," he began, beaming at the assembled crowd. "As we celebrate 60 years of family leadership, I'm excited to announce our vision for the future." Derek and Victoria sat in the front row, both scrolling through their phones. My father sat further back, trying to hide his slight smile as Uncle Robert launched into a presentation about modernization and strategic restructuring. "The old ways of doing business are behind us," Uncle Robert declared, clicking through slides showing his proposed changes. "It's time for bold new leadership and fresh perspectives." The changes he outlined would have made my grandfather weep. Cost-cutting measures that would gut our R&D department. Outsourcing plans that would eliminate the quality control my grandfather had built his reputation on. A complete departure from the principles that had built Sullivan Industries. "And now," Uncle Robert said, reaching the end of his presentation, "I'd like to call for a vote on these initiatives. As majority shareholder and chairman of the board." "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding about that majority," I interrupted, stepping into the room. The silence was immediate and absolute. Uncle Robert's hand froze mid-gesture as I walked to the center of the room. Derek actually dropped his phone. Victoria stopped mid-selfie, her perfectly arranged expression crumbling. "James," Uncle Robert recovered quickly, his smile tightening. "This is a private shareholders meeting. Security is unnecessary," I finished, nodding to Maria, who began distributing documents to the board members. "As a major shareholder, I have every right to be here." "Major shareholder?" Derek scoffed. "You don't have any shares. They were part of your termination agreement." "Those shares were," I agreed. "But not the ones I've been acquiring for the past decade. And certainly not the ones controlled by grandfather's family trust." The board members were now reading through Maria's documents, their expressions shifting from confusion to understanding. Uncle Robert snatched a copy, his face darkening as he read. "This is impossible," he muttered. "These trusts were dissolved." "Were they?" I asked, stepping up to the podium. "Or did you just assume they were because nobody had claimed them?" Grandfather was very specific about the conditions under which these shares could be exercised. Jason stepped forward, connecting his tablet to the presentation screen. The ownership diagram that appeared caused audible gasps throughout the room. "As you can see," I continued, "through various holdings and trust arrangements, I now control 51% of Sullivan Industries' voting shares. And my first act as majority shareholder is to call for a new vote. One on leadership." Uncle Robert's face had gone from red to white. "You can't do this." "The board serves at the pleasure of the shareholders," Maria interjected smoothly. "And Mr. Sullivan has the votes to reconstitute it entirely." The next hour was a blur of legal proceedings and corporate governance. When the dust settled, the changes were dramatic. I was installed as CEO, my father restored as full president of operations. Uncle Robert, Derek, and Victoria were removed from their positions, though offered ceremonial roles to save face. "This is our legacy," I addressed the shocked room. "Not a playground for entitled executives, not a piggy bank for family members who never learned the value of work. This is Sullivan Industries, built by a man who understood that true success comes from innovation, quality, and respect for every employee who helps build our products." The vote to reject Uncle Robert's modernization plan was unanimous. The board members, many of whom had known my grandfather, seemed relieved to see the company returning to its core values. As the meeting concluded, Uncle Robert approached me, his swagger replaced by uncertainty. "You planned this all along," he said. "Even before the firing." "No, Uncle Robert," I corrected him. I learned it. From every dismissive comment, every time you underestimated me, every moment you thought you were teaching me humility. The lessons just weren't the ones you intended. The aftermath was both swift and far-reaching. News of the change in leadership sent Sullivan Industries stock soaring. Employees celebrated the return of what they called real Sullivan leadership. The defense contract, nearly lost under Derek's mismanagement, was saved and expanded. Victoria's final Instagram post about Sullivan Industries read simply, "Sometimes the boss girl gets bossed. Living my best life in Bali. #new chapter #blessed." Derek tried to launch his own tech company but discovered that yacht maintenance skills didn't translate well to actual business management. A month after the takeover, I sat in my grandfather's old office. My office now, looking at his portrait on the wall. "You knew this might happen," I said to his smiling image. "That's why you set up those trusts, why you taught me everything from the ground up." My father entered carrying a familiar wooden box. "Found this in the storage room," he said. "Dad always said it was for the right moment." Inside was my grandfather's old nameplate, the one that had sat on his desk during the company's early days. Simple brass engraved with "Patrick Sullivan, Founder," and below it his favorite saying, "Build from the foundation up." I placed it on my desk next to my modern one. Old and new, foundation and future, exactly as it should be. That evening as I walked through the factory floor, something Uncle Robert had never done. I stopped to talk with Frank, our longest-serving line supervisor. "Your grandfather used to do this," he said, smiling. "And every day where the real work happens." He'd say, "Real leaders understand every floor," I finished. "Some lessons stick with you." Sullivan Industries continued to grow, but now with purpose and principle. We maintained the innovation my grandfather had valued while honoring the craftsmanship he'd built his reputation on. The Sullivan name once again stood for something more than profit margins and power plays. Uncle Robert still serves on the board, though his role is largely ceremonial. Sometimes during meetings I catch him watching me with a mixture of respect and regret. He learned his own lesson about humility, though not the one he'd intended to teach. As for me, I keep my grandfather's tie pin on my desk, a reminder that true leadership isn't about power or position. It's about understanding your foundation, valuing every person who helps build your success, and never forgetting that the most important lessons often come from the people you're trying to teach. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. Better than they expected, better than they believed possible, better than even you imagined. That's the real Sullivan legacy.